So the way that I think about iOS is a broad and a deep framework. You could spend a lifetime learning iOS in the same way that you could probably spend a lifetime learning Photoshop or Illustrator. So the way that we approach teaching iOS is, you may have already realized this already. I mean, I don't know if this is a big secret, but most apps in the Bay Area for companies are kind of like the same. If you look at Twitter or Tumblr or Facebook, what do they have in common? They have an authentication. They have errors when you don't authenticate properly. They have a profile page of some kind. They probably have a feed of stuff configured in some way, whether it's a full picture or like a Pinterest-style kind of waterfall. What do you think is going to happen if I click on that picture? Gosh, it's probably going to expand into a bigger picture, right? What about if I click on my profile picture? Well, there's probably going to be a thing that pops up from the bottom asking me if I want to upload my photo or take a new one, right? There's probably a liking feature involved. There's probably commenting. There might be chat. So it's almost kind of depressing what a small list of things you want to work with. And so how do we run this class? We run this class by focusing more from a use case perspective, just like you do product design, which is forget about all the features of Photoshop or forget about all the features of iOS. What are you doing every single day? And as long as you can build those set of Lego building blocks, who cares if we didn't cover comprehensively some aspect of the iOS framework? It clearly wasn't important. So with each week, we escalate the kind of difficulty level, but also the coolness of the use cases. So week 1, very little programming, right? Week 1 is, I'm sure you all probably use Keynote, InVision, Pop, maybe some other tool for clickable wireframes. And so this first week is all about, in this 2-hour session, we're going to walk out of this class in the next hour and a half, replacing all of those tools. And I think you're going to find that it's pretty straightforward. The workflow is going to be very similar to the workflow that you might have with Keynote or Pixate, which is I'm going to drag in, I'm going to create these full screens in Sketch or in Photoshop. I'm going to import them into my Xcode project, and then I'm going to lay them out in a big pile, and then I'm going to stitch them together, probably using hot states, right? And then maybe for some advanced features, like for example in InVision, I know you can have sticky headers, you can have sticky footers, you can have scrollable regions. But even in this week, we're going to go further than you can go with those prototyping tools. You can have native iOS-style navigation, right? Which you can kind of ghetto fake with Pixate, with InVision or Keynote. If I'm clicking on the tabs, you can kind of fake it out to make it look like it's switching, just like the real tabs, right? But here we're going to use the native interaction, so they're already going to look a little bit higher fidelity. So that's the mission of week 1. So with week 2, we're going to, not impressed with this scroll? Did you guys see it? Look on the right, carousel. So we're going to see how to implement this feature here. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Charlie. So the week 2 is all about user input, loading states, and error states. So small list of things, just 3 things. Actually, with these 3 things, actually ups the fidelity by quite a bit. So with Facebook, for example, or even for Dropbox, because I can have user input, it has all the native keyboard feels, and then I'm not actually going and hitting the network to log in, right? I'm just doing things with delays. Just like kind of a type of animation. At the end of a delay, I'm going to execute that same transition that I learned in week 1. And just for fun, we'll play with a few other things to implement effects like this, which are actually really easy to do. Now, week 3 is when you really start to level things up. So with week 3, we're going to start to play with the animations and gestures frameworks. And that really opens up things, pretty unique interactions, right? So like there's this, I don't know even what the purpose of this middle app is. I actually forget where I got it from. But, hey, I can move these smileys over. I can resize them. I can pinch and rotate them. This is the paper app, obviously, from Facebook. I don't know if anyone still uses that. But it was a big deal when it first came out. Of course, Mailbox here. with the kind of interaction dynamic that they introduced. And so the moral of the story is that like there's three pretty radically different UIs here, right, that have different interaction dynamics. And we're going to learn how to implement these as well as many more. Actually, at week 3, you actually already have a ton of tools in your toolkit to rival certainly anything in the Framer toolkit. You would be at complete parity, or I would argue further than what Framer will readily offer you. But if you've actually used Framer, say who's used Framer here before? So a few people. So have you ever used Framer to build 2, 3, or 4 screens together in one experience? Raise your hand if you've built it for 3 or 4, 2, 3, 4 screens. It gets pretty, I don't know how you organized it, but it probably got a little bit more complex. Because Framer doesn't really encourage a way to organize like a lot of screens in a full app flow. And so with week 4, what we're going to do is we're going to understand how to design each screen separately, but then stitch them together so that they might appear together, such as this YouTube hamburger menu, right? The much hated now hamburger menu. So lame. But here it is, the hamburger menu, 2 screens designed completely differently. Because remember that each of these screens actually has pretty rich dynamics themselves. Like for example, as you know, if I click on these right here, that's going to go into another thing. It's going to do this cool transition, and I can drag that around, right? And then kind of like it goes in that bottom right, and you can dismiss it. So all of the logic required to support that is going to be in one file. And then all of the logic to support the menu interaction is going to be in a completely separate file. So that's going to be one key to engineering, is just to separate the problems as much as possible. So that's what we're doing in week 4. You can see that Airbnb, it's the exact same thing, except there's this fun little perspective transform, which we'll learn how to do. So then in week 5, similar concept. It's actually quite subtle with the distinction between week 4, which is called custom navigation, and week 5, which is called custom transition. So these are 2 features that iOS gives you. So these 3 things have something in common in the sense that in all 3 cases, you have kind of one image that travels from one screen to another. So if I were to, and if this was like 2010, if I were to click on her picture, then it would probably open up another screen, right? It probably, like, her profile page would probably slide in from the right. Is that correct? So in this case, it's actually still doing a transition to another screen, but it's a lot more lightweight feeling because most of the UI is not changing. So this is very in vogue now. This is the same thing. This is the Moves app. And so if I were to show you that little green ball was a day view of how many miles I walked in a day, then just by going to that transition and having that ball go back in there, I could squint my eyes. I could not even read any of the words. So Braden Kowitz, he's a design partner at Google Ventures. He does the Braden test. So Braden has terrible, terrible vision. And so what he does, the Braden test is he goes like this. He looks at his mock, and he kind of lifts up his glasses like this, and he tries to look at them. And he says that if he can still get the gist of the page very quickly, then it's a good thing. If he needs his Coke bottle glasses, then maybe he needs to reevaluate design. So just by using that one little feature, you really conveyed the power of that information just instantly. And then so week 6, we actually take a totally different turn. So week 6, it's a preparation. So week 6 and 7 is all about, well, hey, if you want to build real apps, we'll at least show you how to get started along that path. And so for the first time, this looks like the same as the previous screens, but it's actually not. This is actually what's called a table view or a collection view. In other words, this is not a screenshot. This is actually all of the constituent components, the labels, the images, the buttons, and so on. And it's organized into this long scrollable view. And why is that important? Well, it's important even for prototyping because even when you're prototyping, you have to mock data a lot, right? You have to create some kind of experience, and so you have to create mock data. Wouldn't it be easier sometimes if you wanted just to tune and tweak mock data if you could just plug it in? And the other feature with it is, of course, you can actually connect. This sets you up for this next week, which is connecting it up with the network and actually pulling this data down from the network. Now, so we're going to use Parse. I don't know if you know Parse. Parse it's owned by Facebook. It's a service to help you very quickly build mobile apps. And so one thing that I can do with Parse is, I promise you, any app idea that you come up with, I could probably get it working in Parse in a couple hours or less, right? You have to do something called schema design, which is just how I'm going to organize your data, and then I could be up and running. You came to me and you wanted to build Twitter, you wanted to build Pinterest, you wanted to build any popular app that's out there right now. I know it sounds weird, but we could actually plug it in using Parse very quickly. It's going to take you some time to kind of reach that stage, but that's the stage that you can get to. So one thing that's interesting about iOS development and Android development is all of the effort is actually in the view design, the view implementation. It's actually, you'll see, gruelingly time-consuming to create high-fidelity interactions. You can slap on something and it'll be like roughly there very, very quickly. I'm sure you've seen people create prototypes in just a couple weeks. But to actually make a lot of custom stuff, it actually takes quite a long time, and 90% of the effort is in the views, interactions, and animations. So the back-end piece of mobile is really, really easy. And then just for fun, in week 8, just to kind of stretch our legs a little bit, we're going to learn how to use this physics framework in case you want to deviate from RESTful clients and make a fun little game. So this is the arc of the class. The kind of cadence is, so every Tuesday, I'm going to introduce a set of use cases. So, for example, the family of use cases that I'm going to chase down are the ones that I'm going to, by illustration, I'm going to build in Xcode. I'm about to jump into Xcode and construct these use cases. And you're welcome to follow along. I don't always recommend it, because what happens is I'm doing a lot of talking, I'm doing a lot of showing how to use the tool, and so if you're trying to look, follow, and then you're going to make a mistake because I'm typing pretty quick, and then once you start in debugging mode, you've probably missed like 3 things that I've said. So if you're feeling like I'm kind of going slow, then by all means, follow along with me. But otherwise, I would strongly suggest that you just kind of watch what I'm doing and just try to process it. Then immediately, you should get started on the homework. So as soon as you possibly can, if you can even spend. So one designer gave me a tip, which is don't wait until the nighttime. Nighttime, you're tired. You just had dinner. You're sleepy. Your mind is not really ready to process new information. So instead, wake up at 9 a.m., defer going. A lot of us have flex time, right? Go an hour later into work. Spend an hour in the morning when you're fresh, chipping away the homework. Just go until you have a question, then post, and then head off to work, right? And then just in the evening time, catch up on any emails or whatever you needed to do that you missed because you were late going to work. So that's one kind of pro tip. Then Thursday, then we're going to have a lab where we're going to build what's in this section right here. So we're going to build, say, this Facebook app for this lab today. On Thursday. And then finally, you're going to continue to build this homework for this week, which is the Dropbox client. And this Dropbox app is due Monday at midnight. So your goal is, it's kind of like Pokemon, collect them all. You want to collect as many optionals as possible. So what you want to do is, if you find yourself getting stuck on an area, think of each little line as kind of like a point, right? And so you're trying to collect as many points as possible. And so if you're stuck in a zone, then you can maybe collect 3 points instead of getting stuck on this one thing. So if things are working almost, and you have a question, something isn't working quite the way you want to, just get it kind of working, and then move on, and maybe post in the support channel, hey, there's an extra line, or there's some weird spacing issue. Can you help me debug that? And then see if you can collect a few optionals, right? And the reason why is, remember how I told you that this class is all about use cases? If you can do all of these use cases, then you can build more and more apps. So all the optionals represent very high frequency use cases. And then the first 5 weeks, it's the I call it the wax on, wax off period. So you're, Karate Kid, you're doing all these drills. Anyone watch this? Is that still the right generation to talk about Karate Kid? So then once we finish the homework, we're going to transition to the fun part, which is we're really going to prove the claim that I made, which is you're going to try to apply all of these skills to build an app that you design. So sometime between now and then, we're going to match you into a group. So we try to be as good about it as possible. It's pretty hard to match a bunch of really talented people on a single app. And so we're going to do mingling sessions. We're going to do app brainstorming sessions together. We've done personality quizzes in the past. And then ultimately, you'll complete a survey where you'll kind of identify anybody that you're driving with. You'll identify anybody you're not driving with, which is totally cool as well. We won't match any of those people together. We won't tell anybody about that. And your general app area interests, right? So it doesn't have to be a app idea, but just, hey, I like consumer stuff. Hey, I like social stuff. Hey, I like Google. Hey, I like travel. Hey, I like enterprise. Okay, so I'm about to open up Xcode and transition to the next part. Anyone have any questions so far? Seems good? Excited? Cool. All right, so I'm going to throw open a new Xcode project. I'm going to repeat some stuff that I said in the tip calculator app. So actually, oops, I opened the wrong Xcode. So I'm going to open up Xcode beta. So I believe like any day now, the kind of release version of Xcode 7 will be available. Once you do that, you want to pretty much immediately get on it. Xcode does have a lot of bugs, so they're typically resolved in future versions. It's never a good idea to stay on an older version. All right, new project. We get a bunch of choices. Good news. You will never, ever select anything other than single view application. This is the same as true for engineers as well. So I'm going to open up single view application, and I'm going to leave everything default except the name of my app. So whatever I want to call this app. And so let me call this app Google, because this is what I'm going to be building. And so I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to choose a place to save this. So the Google assets are in the Facebook group if you do want to follow along for a bit. So the first thing I noticed, again, just to reorient yourself, I know you did this for the tip calculator, and I'll do this lightning fast. In the upper left-hand corner, you have the device that you want to run on, right? So you have your simulator, so you can choose any dimension that you want. I'm still nostalgic about the iPhone 5S, but whatever. If you want these gigantic phones, you can also run it there. And even better now with iPhone 7, for the first time ever, for free, Apple allows you to run on your device. They used to charge you $99 to do that. And so one of your goals by today is maybe if you could hang back, if you haven't installed your tip calculator on your phone yet, then see if you can do that tonight, and I'll help you. I'll hang back and help you get that done if you're having trouble. And then, so this is the play and stop, kind of straightforward. I want to start it up, I want to stop it. Then it's all about panels in Xcode, right? So I have my file list on the left-hand side. You see all these things right here? You'll never use them. So always stay on this left-hand side. Left-hand side where all my files are. Then on this right-hand side, we'll get to the double rings later, I have the left panel expansion, the bottom, and the right panel. Your life in Xcode is going to be hiding and showing panels. I know designers, I've learned a lot about designers over the past few years, and I know designers love shortcut keys. I think designers love shortcut keys more than engineers do, to be honest. And so, of course, there's shortcut keys for all of these things if you want to learn them. So, for example, Command-Shift-Y for some reason hides and shows this bottom pane. And then the other aspects are, you see in this bottom right-hand section. So this bottom right-hand section, there's two little things. Let me open up the storyboard real quick. So the storyboard, this is like my canvas in Photoshop. So this has all of my apps. This has all of my screens in it, just like the Photoshop canvas. So I notice on the right-hand side in this paneling, I have all of my objects here. So we're going to use a very small number of these. And then on this far right, you guys see this, is this media strip. So this is where I pull all of my image assets from. So right now it's empty because I don't have any assets. And then this panel right here, I'll show you in a second when I start adding elements here. So the first thing that I like to do is I'd like to do something that all apps have. You know what I think is the greatest irony? Maybe you could help me answer this question. Have you guys seen these screens before? These types of screens? Do you recognize this? This is a kind of a walkthrough of an app. I don't know if I'm taking crazy pills, but like every designer has always scoffed at these screens to me. They've always like, no one reads them, they're not useful, it's design of everyday things, you need to be able to create your app without explaining to people how to use them. And they'll tell me how the iPhone was famously released with no manual and you just figure it out, right? So then tell me, why does every single app have one of these things?
Because non-designers, non-tech people don't get this.
So does anyone, Angel?
I think another reason is that just because someone installs an app doesn't mean that they're going to open it right after they install it. So you have to re-convince them on the value proposition before you ask them to create an account, which is not true with the iPhone. You just turn on.
Okay. So maybe there is a reason to have these. But the first thing that I want to do is I want to take these assets. Notice that if you've done production assets for iOS developers before, you know what this at2x means. It means that this is intended to be run on a Retina device, and so this has double the number of pixels, right? So if you label it at2x, it's automatically going to be handled for you by iOS. So I'm going to take these icons, I'm going to take these assets, and the first thing that you do is on your left-hand side. So ignore app delegate, you'll probably never use it. You're eventually going to have a bunch of these view controller files, but for now we'll ignore it. And then you have, of course, your main storyboard, which is your canvas. Your launch screen is what it sounds like. It's the first thing that's visible. And then assets. So assets is where all your images go. So I'm going to click on assets. And then I'm going to drag these into the left-hand side here. So now that they've been dragged over here, I'll tell you what the 2x did. It didn't do anything special. If I click on this, you see how there's the 1x, 2x, and 3x now? So at 2x just automatically placed it here. If my file had a different extension, I can simply drag it around, right? But if I try to, since this is a Retina asset, if I try to move this over here, it's going to classify that as a standard asset. And if I drag it onto my screen, it's going to try to make it 640 wide, right? Whereas if I have it over here, it's going to make it 320, which is the classic iPhone width. And this is the new higher resolution. So now that I've done that, I go back to my storyboard, and then you see how there's this goofy square screen. So I don't know why Apple thought this was a good idea actually. They just wanted to prepare for square devices. But the reality of the situation, it's for like TV and watch design. But the reality is, I design most of my things for phones, right? I can lay my phone out. I can lay my phone design on this, and it's responsive. It'll shrink down, and then it'll be fine. But I think it's really goofy to do my designs in this gigantic square because that's not what most phones look like. So I just go on the right-hand side here to size. I click on this icon. Can anyone tell what this icon is? It looks like a shield to me. Slider. So a couple of people identified as a slider. So just to walk through these icons. So slider, the way I memorize it is that DJs use sliders, for their mixing board, I guess. And so sliders kind of tune properties. And so this is the properties tab. This looks like a driver's license to me. I'll call it the driver's license, even though it's called the identity inspector. Driver's license say who you are. Who are you? So the driver's license is all about the identification of this screen. Ruler, pretty self-explanatory, all the dimensions of the thing that I have selected in the storyboard. And this one, I promise you, let's play a game of memory, right? I know I'm dumping a lot on you. Can you please, let's see how well we can do remembering this phrase. Key value coding compliant error. Sounds weird, right? Key value, maybe you can remember it just by how weird it sounds. I guarantee you're going to hit this key value coding compliant error. When you do hit it, the answer will be to go to this tab. So we'll get to there. So I'm going to click on this. When I say click on the view controller, by the way, you see how there's this yellow thing where if I hover over it, it says view controller. Whenever I tell you to debug, I'll say, hey, can you select your view controller and click properties? So that's, I want you to do this. Click on this yellow little ball. Maybe someone can explain to me why this icon means view controller. But I don't know, a bunch of nested shapes here that are yellow. And then click on properties, and then change the size from inferred to whatever your favorite phone dimension is. So I'm gonna design for the 4.7 inch. And so if I just take this, I'm gonna click on this, and I notice that on this side my properties have changed because now I'm not in the view controller, I'm actually on the view. And so here are the properties I have available. It's all the normal things you can expect out of a view. I'm going to show you that, let's say that I'm going to choose like a blue color. So I'm going to choose a blue color, and then I'm going to hit Command-R to run it. And I just want to prove to you, we already learned this in tip calculator, where if I hit run here, it's going to, I can use Command 1, 2, and 3 to size my simulator to whatever size that I want, and then it's going to have this initial screen here. So while that's loading up, I'm going to come into my objects view. So let's say that I want to come in here and I can type in this filter area and I can type in label. Let's just start to lay out elements, and that filters this out, right? And I'm going to drag this here. One kind of note is you see how I'm zoomed out here. If I look, I want to drag this label on here. Oh no, oh it's so frustrating, right? When you're in this zoomed out mode, it doesn't work. So you have to double click or zoom in using your fingers to kind of pinch to kind of get into the right area. Then I had this label, I click run, and then I can go. And then while that's running, I'll drag in a few more items here. So that label's there now. I'm going to throw in a button. And then, remember that film strip? I'm going to click on that film strip right here. And then, I wonder if that search filter is applying incorrectly to the film strip. So here's your first debugging tip. When Xcode's behaving wonky, just let it take a little nap. Think about it. Think about what it's done, and then just restart it. First thing that you should try: restart the simulator, restart Xcode. You need to do both of these things. So I'm going to open up my project again.
Okay, so quick question. When you selected for 4.7, if you wanted to work on multiple sizes of devices?
If I wanted to work on multiple sizes of devices. So good question. So even though I'm defining it for the 4.7, let me address your question, Chris, in 1 second. So let's say that I'm going to drag like an icon here. So I want to make the Google app, right? So the beautiful thing about iOS, the thing that's really amazing is, anyone here know CSS? CSS? How long did it take you to master CSS, browser compatibility, all the millions of overflow, God knows what, column layouts? That was hard, right? I think it was really hard. iOS, look, what you see is what you get. This is a sin in HTML, isn't it? It's called absolute positioning. Where I dragged it is where it ended up, which is really cool. Let me show you how else it's like HTML. If I go in here, so there's something called a div in HTML, which is a rectangle, right? Everything is a div in HTML, just like how in iOS, everything is a type of what's called UI view. So you see this thing? This is like the div in HTML. Why do we have divs in HTML? To create containers, to lay out things. Anytime you want, like let's say I want a little border, then I'd probably create a view or a div and just lay these in here. And check this out. I'm going to take this label. I'm going to drag it in here like that. And then this gets us to this left-hand panel. This is, remember, again, something I can collapse and expand. And you see this thing right here? This is what's called the view hierarchy. So it's just like the layers list. I'll just refer to this as open up the layers pane. It's like the Photoshop layers pane. So Photoshop layers tells you when things are nested. Why do you nest things in iOS? Same reason you nest them in Photoshop, just to organize elements that are related to each other. It also has other nice features where, let's say that these set of components I always want to move together. So throw them into a container just to organize it, right? Could be invisible. And just, you can hide them as one, you can show them as one, you can animate them as one. Can I rename it? Yes, quick question. So just like Photoshop layers, who here names their layers? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I single click and wait. Double clicking I don't think works. Double clicking does absolutely nothing. Single click and wait. And then I can say, hey, this is my container, my label container. Name doesn't matter. This is for you to understand what this was. And so I'm making this claim. It's so much easier in HTML. What you see is what you get. But that's, I've clearly lied, because you're thinking, because you're a sharp crowd, you guys are thinking, wait, there's all the phone types, right? There's the iPhone 6, iPhone 6 Plus, iPhone 4, suckers. And if it's absolutely positioned, it's going to appear weird in that other phone, right? And so, Chris, I don't have like 4 screens for 4 different phone types here. Instead, we'll learn-ish in this class. It's kind of like has infinite complexity, right? But we're going to learn something called, you probably have heard the word auto layout. So auto layout is a way of specifying how you want these things to change when this phone size changes. So for example, if this phone expands, should this stay centered? Should the width expand? Should it stick to the right-hand side? Right? So auto layout is a way of specifying rules or constraints to instruct it to change its behavior when the phone changes shape. Right? So there's more than one ways to change shape. I have this iPhone 5S. I'm going to hit Command left arrow. What is it going to do when it goes to landscape mode? And you can even run on an iPad here. So everything that we're learning is for an iPad, but we can use the exact same techniques to design for a tablet. So this looks like a pretty intimidating set of controls, right? A lot of stuff. Ugh, so many. It's like it's what I feel like when I look at Photoshop. All these controls. What do I do? So let me kind of show you some good news. Because remember, our goal is we build apps, right? Has anyone used this site, Paterns? Anyone have another favorite site? So if you've seen this before, designers, they never copy. They never copy, but they definitely benchmark. They, so here I'm going to be able to see, of course, a lot of examples of people who've done check-ins, who have commenting, who has some feed of some type, right? So if I'm scrolling in here, I see pretty different looking apps, right? They're pretty different looking. But I'm going to start to list components here. A piece of text, an image, a button, user input, text field it's called. I'm trying to list everything that I see here. So I've already quickly exhausted a lot of stuff because I see lots of labels, I see lots of buttons, I see a way of adding user input. You can't tell from this view, but there is a way to scroll things, something called a scroll view. Well, if I look around here, maybe if I go to I don't know what a coach mark is. Oh, it's a popover. So again, I'm seeing a lot of images. I'm seeing a lot of labels. What if I go to like a list of some kind? So I mean, I can't even find one now, but there's map views. There's web views where you can embed a little website and kind of put that in there. What's the moral of the story here? The moral of the story is that you actually only have to master about 6 controls, right? So most of these you don't use. Most apps consist of this really small subset of things that we're going to learn how to lay out in this way. And for now, choose the screen that you want to run on, right? So if you have an iPhone 6 or if you have an iPhone 5S, just choose the size that matches your phone and then design for that. And then in a later class, we'll learn how to extend it using auto layout. Any questions so far? Okay, so I'm going to try to create that welcome flow, right? So remember the mission I told you. I told you we're going to replace click-through wireframes just even in this session. And even in this session, we're going to go further than what InVision will give us. So let's start off small. Let's go ahead and we'll clear all these things out. And I'm going to go to my media strip, and you see now I have mine. For some unknown reason, it's worked. I go into my welcome and I drag this on here. So if I want another screen here, then I drag this thing called a view controller. It's the very top one. I'm gonna drag this view controller here. Oh, it's this funny box shape. Make it, all the same size. In fact, what I'm gonna do is for this week, click on this document tab, and then disable auto layout by unchecking this box right here. So once you uncheck it, it's going to ask you to do something here called disable size classes. Go ahead and do that, and then it's going to default to the phone shape and not the goofy square shape. So each view controller, kind of what it sounds like, it's basically your n number of screens in your app. So I'm going to go to my film strip, and I'm going to start to drag more of these welcome screens on. So here's my second welcome screen. Here's my third welcome screen. Can't do that. So go drag another view controller on here, and then how about a welcome screen? So I have my screens. They're not connected. They're just kind of like Photoshop style in just a big pile. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to implement this feature where if I click on all the nexts, they're going to advance to the next screen. So the way that I do that, the way that I add kind of a hot state here, is I'm just going to type in button here. And then I'm going to drag in a button just wherever I want it. See how I'm shaping? See how these has little anchors? I'm going to double click on this. I'm going to delete this button text right here. And then now I have this invisible button. You can tell by the anchors, right? That's going to be the hit area. And then so what do I want to do when this button happens? I'm going to take this button. I'm going to control drag from the button to the view controller that I want to go to. And then it's going to give me three choices. Do you want to push, modal, or custom? You'll never select custom. If you're selecting custom at any point in your life, you should probably email me real quick and say, hey, I'm about to select custom. I'll be like, no. Don't do it. Don't you do it. We're going to select modal, right? And before the end of this class, we're going to tell you about the three navigation types in iOS. So we're going to select modal right here. And then just for fun, I'm going to click on this. And so properties, where do I go for properties again? Slider, because DJs tune a lot of stuff for properties. Maybe there's a better mnemonic, I don't know. So DJ tab, and then check this out. Transition, default. Default? Screw that. Flip horizontal. So I'm going to run that. And then now if I click next, flip. And then so if I go back here and do this next button, so I control drag here again, select modal, click on this is called a segue. Kind of makes sense, I guess. Segueing, it's transitioning. Choose transition. We tried cover vertical, all right. That's for, oh no, sorry. We tried flip horizontal. Let's try cover vertical. Run that. And then next, this is the flip. Here's the cover vertical. It's a classic. Rise from below. And then one more next state. And then control drag to the next one, modal. Click on this one. Sure, we'll do the cross dissolve. Don't do the partial curl. It's kind of fun, but it'll actually mess you up. So next, and then the cross dissolve. I don't know what I did that wrong on the last one. So next. There's this weird bug. I can almost guarantee I know what's happened. For some reason, this button has been pushed behind this image. So I guess this is as good as time as any to talk about, let's see here. So this is one of those frustration points, right? If this were Photoshop, what's on top? Welcome 3 or button? Who thinks Welcome 3 is on top if this is Photoshop? Who thinks button is on top if it's Photoshop? All right, so whatever you thought for Photoshop, it's the reverse. So try to remember that. One designer explained it to me like, well, button, it's like closer to me. Maybe he was like kind of envisioning it like that. So anyway, button's on top. I'm going to move it behind, and then move it on top again. Let's see if I get lucky. Let's see if it was the oldie but goodie. So let this go. So sometimes it hangs in here. I don't think it's ever going to come back. You just Command Q and then play again. So if I click next, I click next. I think I did it right. So it was that weird issue. It was clearly on top. It switched below. So one common trick that I always do is I'll often add colors to invisible things just to make sure, just the sanity check. Another thing that you can do, you see how this is a running app right now? I'm going to do Command-Shift-Y to expose that bottom pane. You see this icon right here? I don't know what this looks like. I guess maybe screens on top of each other. I think that's what it's supposed to be. So if I click on this, then this goes into this kind of debug view. It's kind of wonky. But if I rotate this, and there's not a lot of separation here, so if I were to kind of zoom this apart, so weird. I can't even see the, strange I don't even see the button. Oh, this is the last screen that I'm on, sorry. So there is no button on that screen. So now here I'm in next. That looks like an unfortunate looking error. Let me run that again. Wow. Beta Xcode. Okay, click on the View Hierarchy Viewer, and then rotate this. Kind of spread things apart. So you see that little shape right there? So that's another thing that we might want to do to debug. So a lot of weird things will happen. Things will clip things unexpectedly. So there's a couple tricks for you. So with this, maybe you can admit that we already have achieved one level of click-through prototyping, right? Drag screens in there, hot states, control dragging, right? So this is the primitive kind of basic click-through prototyping. But we're not too happy with that because we want more. And so we're going to learn about two other mechanisms that we can use for two different transition types that you commonly see in iOS. So before we do that, I think it's a good time to take a break. Let's give you, bathroom's kind of far away, so 7 minutes till 8:10 we'll resume. Most people are surprised by, once I break this down, how few navigation types there are in iOS. So we've already learned one. It's called modal navigation. So I don't know if modal is a word that you guys already know. Maybe lightbox. Lightbox is a word. Is that a layperson's word for designers? So modal equals lightbox. And so what is a lightbox? A lightbox is a kind of a temporary view that interrupts whatever your current flow is, and shows you an ad, has you log in, does whatever, and then you can dismiss it, right? And so modal views or lightboxes in iOS by default are full screen. One day, it's not terribly common, but we'll also learn how to make them non-full screen, but that will be in a later week. So although these things all look different, so this is Foursquare, here's the kind of fade in, here's the Stocks app where you do the classic flip, and then this one, which is the cover vertical, the rise from below. These are all modal transitions. So they have different animations, but they're just different ways that the lightbox can appear. And so we've already learned how to do this transition type. So 1 of 3, right? 2 of 3 is this thing that's called push navigation. It's kind of a weird word. So the push navigation, I guarantee you know, because it's by far the most common navigation in iOS. And so the way that works is here's my Twitter app, and I'm gonna begin to click around in this app. So I'm gonna navigate. I'm gonna click, on tweets, and then that's gonna slide to my tweets view. I'll click on Natasha's post. I'll go back, and so the analogy of push notification is just like web browsing, right? So me navigating through links. And so the analogy that I like to kind of draw there, let's see if I can do this, is let's say that I go to a website. What happens? What's the logged out view of Pinterest look like? That's not useful. All right, so let's see. I'll go to Yahoo, and I'll begin to browse. And so look at this. What this browser is. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a new window. And so, what is the anatomy of a browser? Well, if you think about it, it's the stuff at the top. So this kind of gives me context for the page. So there's the title of the page and so on. And then I have my navigation arrows, right? Left and right. And then and then I have this huge content area in the middle. So if I go to Yahoo, and then I start to click around, like let's say that let's see here, something nice and safe to click on. Okay, Modern Family, Sophia Vergara, whatever. Vergara. So I get one thing, and then maybe I can keep on clicking here, and then I kind of keep on clicking some more, and then I notice that this like history is building up, right? So push navigation is exactly this analogy. So let's see if we can implement push navigation. So what I want to do is, let's say that I'll just do this using kind of generic view controllers. So let's say that I'm making Facebook, and in a Facebook feed, I have kind of that navigation bar, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this controller. Let's say that I want to begin to add navigation to this, so I'll turn this into a browser. So I'm going to click on this view controller, and then I'm going to click Editor, Embed in Navigation Controller. I'm going to tap that, and then I see that it has now not one but 2 views. And so this looks kind of goofy. So you see this left-hand view right here? This thing, the way I think about it is this was the same as this. That's as if you had an empty browser on the left-hand side, right? So for example, right here, I have that, you see this top bar right here that we're all familiar with? That's the same as this top area that's right here. And eventually, as you all know, there will be a title here and a left button and probably a right button. So this is the empty browser, and this is the first content page. So unlike web browsers, mobile navigation requires you to have a home page. So like here, this allows me to not have a home page, or I guess it puts Google here. But in this case, I have to specify some home page. So maybe this will be my feed view. So I'm going to take this, I'll kind of set a color here. Maybe this is my profile picture. And then let's say that here's my name. There's something in here, changes to a different color. And then, I'm going to option drag, and maybe this is my, if it's Facebook, this is maybe the last post that I did, right? Is that kind of a nice sketch? Sorry, the contrast is so washed out. And so I can double click on this top area and say this is my profile page. And so I want to create 2 more screens here. I want to create maybe a full screen that is my image. So I'll take this, and I'll change the color to this big green thing. And then, maybe I'll have another screen here that is going to be, when I click on this post, this gray post. So let's say that I just take this and I turn this gray. So if I want to add a hot state here, what do I do? Add a button. So throw a button on here. What's your name, by the way? Who said that? Oh, Kevin. I already know your name. I'm trying to learn everybody's name. All right, so add a button here, and then control drag to this screen, right? And then now, remember how we did modal last time? Now it's push. So whenever it's a link navigation, it's push. So as soon as I select this as push, you see what it does here? It adds a navigation bar up here. Because if you think about it for mobile apps, every screen probably has a different title. So this will be maybe my, profile picture. And then if I want to add a button onto this guy right here, so I'm going to take this, control drag over here, push navigation. So I can kind of scoot this around. Crashed. So I can kind of scoot this around, make this a little bit nicer. It's going to be impossible to keep these lines nice. It's called segue spaghetti. Once it starts to, it's going to be possible for these really limited screens, but it's really hard in general. So maybe this will be my story. And then if I run this again, what's going to happen? It's going to be this screen right here. That's not that useful. So the sharp-eyed people have noticed that there's this special little arrow right here, right? And so if I take this arrow, I can even drag it around. So if I want this to be the first screen, or if I want this to be the first screen, I'll do like this, right? One little thing that can happen is if I drag this around and then I delete a screen, lost the arrow. The arrow went away. Now if I run this again, there's going to be a problem. It's just going to be a black screen and there's this error message. So whenever something goes wrong and you're going to post in Facebook, you generally want to show whatever text appeared on this right-hand side as well, right? So I'm going to click on this view controller. I'm going to click on properties, and then I'm going to select is initial view controller. So once I select that, that arrow appears. So if I select run now, then it's just like opening up a new browser, except it goes and it loads my homepage, right? So my homepage is that it's in iOS terms, it's called the root view controller. So it'll take that content and it'll put it into the content space of my navigation controller. But the navigation controller owns this top area. So now if I click on this green thing, then it automatically did that navigation. Right? It even does the iOS 7 introduced interactive back. See how, I don't have to click on back, right? I can just start dragging from the edge here. Everyone knows that feature, right? And then I can click on this gray area to go to the story. And by the way, I don't know why, but maybe for some weird reason, my picture appears multiple places. So what if my green thing is right here? To go back to my profile picture. And then something even more weird. I don't know why this would be the case. I'm in totally contrived land right now. But what if, for some reason, there was a way to get to the gray area here? So you all know that this can happen in real apps, right? This can happen on the web. This can happen on Twitter or on Facebook, where you can infinitely navigate. You can go in a loop, right? So I'm going to take this green thing. I'm going to control drag here, push. I'm going to take this gray thing. I'm going to control drag here. Oh wait, did I put a button on this yet? So I'm going to check my layers view. And then so add a button onto this guy. Take this button and drag it onto here, make it a push. So starting to see what I mean by segue spaghetti? So it's really hard to clean up too. You should try. So click on the green thing, click on the story, click on the green thing again, gray thing, gray, green. So what happens on the web if I'm clicking back to the same page that I've already been on? Is that the same page, really? It's a new copy of that same page, right? Because if you look at the history, and as I start to navigate back, I'm going to start to cross through the same pages again. So the same is the case in mobile. Those pages are actually still there. The analogy that you're supposed to think about here is they're piling on sheets of paper, right? And so when I hit the back, I'm actually just peeling those sheets of paper off. And so you can see, like, this is the kind of the push navigation. And so most apps, the way it looks ultimately is when you look at their storyboard, there's going to be about 12 screens. I mean, it's a pretty average number for an app. And you will just see a lot of cross navigation because there's usually a lot of ways to get to the same place in apps, right? So this is kind of like use case 2, navigation 2, push navigation. So use case 3, final use case, which is tab navigation. So tabs are the things along the bottom. So remember, hamburgers are out, tabs are back in. It's like boxers and brief. It switches every generation. So the thing that I want to do now is, instead of a navigation controller, I'm going to add in a tab bar controller. So drag this in, and you see it brings a bunch of windows with it, right? And by the way, you'll notice that there's a navigation controller in here as well, right? So basically, there's 2 ways to add navigation. You can drag it in from here. How did I get this inside of navigation again? Embed in navigation. So they're identical. I can take this thing right here, I can delete it, and I can control drag. There's a lot of control dragging in iOS, and drag this into some page and call it. See, there's now a 4th item here. Which one's the home page for that new tab, right? That new browser. So the fact that I have all of these navigation controllers, does that make sense to you? I think it makes as much sense as me having a bunch of these things, right? So they can all have their own history and their own view. So that's what multiple navigation means. It just means multiple browser windows that are open. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to, I was going into my tab, so I'm going to delete this guy, I'm going to delete this guy. And let's have this switch into like view controller. And so what I want to do is I just want to have a couple tabs along the bottom. And I'm just going to make these 3 different colored screens. So click on the screen, change the background to be, say, green, blue, and pink. Why not? So these are the 3 screens in my application. And then control drag from my tab bar. And now I see that there's another thing, view controllers. So I select it. There's a line that appears. I do this again. I select it. And so the fact that this is just gray right now on the bottom, I think is a weird little bug. That's not what it looks like when I run it. Let's learn a new name. So you're Chris. You're Effie. What's your name in the middle? Yeah. Cameron. All right. So Cameron, how do I make this tab bar controller the first screen that comes up?
You go to first panel when you choose use as the initial view.
Okay, so I go to the first panel.
On the right side panel.
Oh, the right side panel.
At the top.
And then just select this is initial view controller. Cool. All right, so I get my arrow that's appeared. I also could have dragged it. Drug it. So I see I don't have any fun little icons. Makes me kind of sad. But I do have the titles. The titles here on the bottom. Item, item, item. So if I click in the middle area, click on the right side, I already get things switching around. So let's say that I want to change what was here. I'm selecting in this middle area. There's a little visual glitch why this is gray. I don't really know why. On the right-hand side, it says item. I'm going to change it to like green. And I'm going to change this one to blue. And then I'm going to change this one to pink. While that's running, I'm going to pull in some more fun assets for me to use. So I'm going to pull in some tab icons from Facebook. So I'm going to go over here, image assets, and drag this tab icons folder in here. So just like you can create these groups if you want to just. It's just about logical grouping. It's just organization. It has no real effect. So feed tab, messages tab, more tab, notification. These are the Facebook icons, right? So I go to my main storyboard. Let's see. I think I'd run something, right? So if I go here, I see green, item, and pink. So the middle one didn't take for some reason. It's because I changed it from here. The title blue. All right, so now I can click on this and I can set that image. How about to messages tab, and then I'll change this one to feed tab. I'll change this one to, oh no, I fixed the colors. How about more tab? So if I run this again, then I have, this is starting to look familiar? Green, blue, and pink. Angel?
Is it automatically color masking those icons?
It is, yeah. So in fact, the way that you design these icons is really weird. It's not expecting any data in the RGB. It's expecting an alpha mask with a gradient, and then it's going to take that alpha mask and it's going to apply whatever color based on the alpha that you provide. And so it'll automatically shade this to be blue. So it's kind of interesting. One thing that you're going to realize is that in some things in iOS, man, you will be shocked at how easy it is to do some really complex things because it was made to do that stuff, right? And you will be shocked by how hard, how impossible it is to customize something in the way that you might want it. What if I wanted to put a little arrow right here that indicated the selected tab? And what if I wanted to click on blue and I wanted that arrow to slide over and indicate that middle one, right? If things aren't meant to do that, all of a sudden it goes, like some things, like look how quickly you slap this tab stuff together. But if you want to deviate what's provided for you by default, it goes from a 5-minute exercise to like a 2-week exercise, right? And that's the main problem if you've ever worked with mobile designers before. And there's always this push and pull with mobile designers and mobile developers where they're like, no, the tab height, it's all wrong. It's all wrong. It clearly has to be like 4 pixels lower. Like, really? Is that really important? No. I'll do it for you. But trust, but only if you tell me it's important. By the way, I've asked that question to designers many times. They have never, they're like artists, right? You guys are like artists, right? They have never told me it's not important. It's worth your 2 weeks. All right. So what you have to do is you have to throw away the default tab bar controller and you have to build your own tab bar controller. In fact, most apps have built their own. We're going to build our own tab bar controller in week something, 5 or 6 or something, 4 or 5. We're going to build our own because it's so common, right? So anyway, we have this. We've actually explored all 3 navigation types in iOS. What if you want to change the orders of the tab? Grab this guy right here and just drag them around. That contrast is terrible. Okay, so you might notice something weird, which is it seems kind of like naked at the top, right? I don't know. My eyes looks a little bit unbalanced and a little bit weird. Most screens have a bar at the top. Is that fair to say? Most apps, scrolling through all the screens that you can think of, they have a navigation bar. What does that mean? It means that most screens are within a navigation controller. So the real question is there 1 navigation controller or is there 3 navigation controllers? So I'll let you think about this for a second. I'm going to ask you. And I'm going to call on somebody, and let me explain my policy for calling on people. So my policy for calling on people is not to put anybody on the spot. If you feel uncomfortable, if you don't want to answer, just say pass. We'll pass right along. No problem, right? I ask a lot of questions. I put a lot of people on the spot because I got to be entertained here too. It's my evenings as well. But also because it helps me pace the class. It helps me understand if you can't answer it, it's probably my fault. It's probably not yours. So if you don't want to answer, just say pass, and I'll call on somebody else. It's also a great way for me to learn names. So let's see, Matt. Matt, is there 1 navigation controller, or is there 3? One. Okay. Priska? No. Is that right? Yes. Is there 1 navigation controller or is there 3? If there's 1 navigation controller, that's what? And 3 screens. Okay. So let me ask you a question. If I had these things, what's one way that I could tell whether I have 1 or 3 of these? Well, actually, I'll give you the answer to that one. Or I'll kind of ask you a leading question. If I'm navigating, if I pull up 3 pages in here, and I start to click around in each of the pages, and then I click back, do they have 1 history, or do they have 3 histories? They have 3 histories, right? So if I come back in here, and let me ask you, if this were Facebook, or if this were Twitter, if I'm on the tabs, is there 1 history, or is there 3 histories? Who thinks that there's going to be, I'm going to poll, so prepare yourself mentally. Who thinks that there's going to be 3 histories? Okay. So you guys are correct. There are 3 histories. So people who didn't raise their hands, is that because you were not? There can be a number of reasons you didn't raise your hand. So, but think about it. If you're opening up the Twitter app, navigate around. Try if you think it's 1, try it. Open up 3 tabs. Open up Facebook. Go to 3 tabs. Push around. Then go to a 2nd tab. Push around. Go to a 3rd tab. Push around. And then switch from the tabs and start going back. Is it 1 history or is it 3? You'll see, try it, you'll see that there's 3, right? So, in other words, these 3 tabs these 3 view controllers are also in a navigation controller. And so if I click on this green thing, and then do my editor embed in navigation controller, it's going to uselessly push things over to the right. That's annoying. So I'm going to just rearrange this so it looks better to me. And then I'll do the same for blue. And then I'll do the same for this pink one. Running, Command R. All right, so now I have my familiar tab on all 3 screens. It looks like the same tab. In fact, they are completely different tabs, right? Just like in a browser, I didn't have to do new windows. Maybe a better analogy would have been if I had 3 tabs like that, right? So if I'm clicking on these 3 tabs, these 3 tabs will also have 3 separate histories. So at this point, it can kind of take over, right? I can put more things on here. I can begin to do the push notifications. So now we've covered 3 of 3 navigations in iOS. Now there are more. They're not as common. For example, one that you may have seen is the full screen swipe. For example, in the Photos app, often photo apps have some kind of mechanism where there's some kind of infinite swiping. So that's actually another type of navigation, but it's less commonly used. And then, more interesting, what we're going to do in week 4 is custom navigation. So hamburger menu is an example of custom navigation. There's no hamburger navigation controller inside of iOS. That's built by hand, and in fact, it's quite easy to build. And so you can invent your own type of navigation. Like I said, you saw the screenshots. We can do the Airbnb hamburger version as well. It has the same thing in concept, but has that fun little perspective transform. So is it fair to say, have I delivered my promise? Do you feel like we've replaced at least a lot of InVision and a lot of click-through, a lot of Keynote style prototyping, and maybe even a touch further because we have like native style push with the interactive back. You have your tabs, your tab effects, all the fun translucency effects that was so hip in iOS 7. Good. Any questions? Do you want to do some bonus topics? Why not? So let's do 2 bonus use cases. So the first bonus use case that I want is let's implement a scrolling view. So one thing that's common, if I look at my assets here, where'd they go? Why is it on a different screen? And then here, home feed. All right, this looks like a pretty long feed. So I'm going to grab this home feed, throw it into my assets, .xc assets. Toss that in here. So somewhere in here, there's home feed. And then now, inside my thing here, instead of this green view, I want to put this home feed in here. So I have to first grab a scroll view. So the scroll view allows me to scroll things inside of it, kind of like it sounds. So if I drag this in here, make it full screen, you see how I'm intersecting the top? That's by design, right? Again, this was introduced in iOS 7. They wanted it full bleed on the top and the bottom, and it's like slightly visible through it. And so you're supposed to design your views ahead of time so they actually fit the whole thing, and there's this little peekaboo effect. And then I'm going to go to my media strip. Oh, come on. Oh. And then in my home feed, drag it so that's inside of this scroll view. How do I know it's inside the scroll view? What's that? Because it fits the outline? Well, they could be actually, just like Photoshop, on top of each other, but not nested.
You can move the outer one.
You can move the outer one, and if the child goes with it, then that's definitely contained within it. You'll find that, unfortunately, sadly, Storyboard is a very poor replacement for Photoshop. It's very clunky and awkward to kind of like control the elements in the screen here. So what you want to do is you want to rely on your layer view a lot, and you also want to rely on this ruler. So it can be very hard to precisely click on things and position things. You can use arrows as well, but this is the definitive test. You see how this is indented in here? This means that it's not just on top of the scroll view, it's actually inside the scroll view. So cool. I'm going to now run this, except I'm going to be a little bit sad. Because as much as I want this to scroll, no, of course, why would it, that would be too easy, right? So unfortunately, I have to write some Swift now. What? You're making such good progress without like any Swift. So I'm going to come in here. Now, every screen in iOS is completely independent of every other screen. You don't, when you're kind of designing interaction, I just think about things one screen at a time. So every screen has some logic associated with it, has some behaviors. If I double tap on an Instagram photo, I'm going to get a heart that fades in. If I kind of click like in a Facebook post, the thumb will turn blue. So every screen has a Swift file associated with it. And so I want to create a Swift file for this screen. You will have one Swift file for every screen in Storyboard. Don't try to reuse the same Swift file for multiple storyboards, even if you see the same behavior. So I'm going to create a new Swift file. So file, new file. Make sure that you're in this top area. It often I don't know why, it just switches you to this bottom area by default. I guarantee it'll happen to you. Click on this thing right here, and then Cocoa Touch Class, double click on that. And then you see this, it says View Controller. Name it to whatever conceptually is on the screen there. So for example, maybe for the thing that I'm looking at, maybe it's the Feed View Controller, maybe it's the Story View Controller, maybe it's the Home View Controller, anything that makes sense to you, kind of English language, except add View Controller at the end of it. So Feed View Controller, and hit Enter, and save it somewhere. So now I have this Swift file, and holy cow, there's all this stuff in here. A little scary. My heart stopped for a second. And then I'm going to click on Main Storyboard. Now, how did it know that that Swift file was associated with this screen? Well, it doesn't, right? It's a step that you have to do manually. And so I'm going to select the View Controller. The other Maggie, how do I select a View Controller? Inexplicably, I don't have a memory thing for the why View Controllers are yellow balls. But click on this yellow thing, and then who am I? Check my driver's license. right now it thinks that I'm this generic UI view controller, generic screen, but I have some special code for you. So I'm going to type in feed view controller. I'm not a great typist, so Xcode auto-completes a lot of things. So I want to say feed, great. I'm going to enter to accept it, save this, and then at this point, this thing is now linked to the Swift file, right? And so there's a special little view here that you're going to use frequently. This is going to be your home. So I'm going to send your mail. This is where you live. These double rings, right? I click on these double rings. This used to be a tuxedo. Actually, I feel like they watered. I feel like the same way I feel about the new Google icon. It saddens me. So I click on these double rings, and lo and behold, it's so smart. Like when I clicked on this other one, this other view controller, it switches to this useless class. It's the generic view controller class. I click on feed view controller, and very intelligently, it swaps me to the Swift file that I want to work with. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell it how much it should scroll. So how much should it scroll? Well, I have to somehow, I just laboriously, I created labels, I created buttons. I probably put like 10, 20 controls on this side, and I need to kind of call them by name, right? Imagine it's like not naming them is like not naming your kids. How am I going to call them for dinner, So for everything that's on this left side, if I want to tell it to do something, I have to give it a name. It's like birth, So this scroll view, I want to tell it to do something. I want to tell it to be scrollable to a certain height. So I have to give it a name. So guess what? It's control drag. We did this for the tip calculator. And then move that sucker over here. And this is like its christening, right? So I'm going to name it something that makes sense. So I'm going to call it feed scroll view. By makes sense, what I mean is like it's a descriptive name, right? I'm not going to forget what that is. And now this is like its name tag. So this area up here is like the pile of name tags, right? This is where I remember the things on this left-hand side. And then so I'm going to tell you in this thing right here, I'm going to explain why I'm selecting to choose, like type inside of here versus out there. But I'm going to say something like feed scroll view dot content size is equal to CG size, open parentheses. And I'm going to chill out here. Come on. And then eventually it'll pop up this thing. I'm going to select one down. I'm going to say, well, I want you to be 320 wide, and I want you to be really tall. Let's just say 1,000. I don't know how tall. And I'm going to run this. So it's taking a little nap. Yeah, and even better though, it'll be the width and height of your image, your image asset, because that's what you really want the scrollability to be, right? But for now, I'll just use a constant number. So if I scroll here, now I see I have scrollability. I see that I have fixed headers and fixed footers, and I could even add views. How would I make something that was like an additional fixed footer, like the Foursquare check-in button, which is that button that floats in there? I want to land it right here. How would I do that? So here, let me get started here. I'll set you up. I'll tee you up. Yep. So I'm going to add a new control. I'm going to add that Foursquare button right here. Cool. Ah, exactly. So here, I notice that it's inside the scroll view right now, which means if I run this, kind of like you expect, probably should have chosen something that was visible. See that blue button? See how it's scrolling with my view? And so if I pull it out, I go from this button, and I kind of make it like a peer of the scroll view. I'm going to try to. Right? So now they're like peanut butter and jelly. And then I take this, Again, if I click on this button and I drag it, you know what's going to happen? It's going to embed it in the scroll view. Gosh darn it. So there's this tip where you click on the border of the view controller, and then you move the arrows, or you could click on the ruler and type some values in, or use the arrows there. So now, if my button is here, you see how it's now fixed. It's now fixed in there. Oh, is it? Trust me, it's there. It's right there. Priska? How do I make infinite scrolls? Like the Pinterest. We're going to learn that in week 2. So that's one of the optional features in week 2 is infinite scrolling. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up here. Let me give you some pro tips here. So as you've noticed, I've not told you to prepare for Swift. I do recommend that you try to go through those treehouse guides. It is some comfort, although you don't need to know it to that degree. Let me tell you what you do need to know. So I call this style of teaching programming and patent copywriting it. It's like the Rosetta Stone method of teaching programming. I'm not going to formally talk to you about a lot of things. I'm going to see if I can osmosis it to you, right? And you have to help me play along too. Here are the rules that you have to follow along to. So the first rule is, you know how engineers, gosh, annoying engineers, you know how engineers, if you make the slightest little mistake, they'll be like, oh, you're wrong. Actually, I think what you mean is and I'm like, oh gosh, nerd, like you're kind of being bogged down by details. There's a reason for that, and actually, you designers are the same way. Maybe you don't realize it, but if I misspell something here, I don't know if anyone misspelled anything in the tip calculator. What if I forgot an L in my scroll view? What's going to happen? Well, it's going to be red, right? It's going to have an angry thing, and it's going to say use of unresolved identifier feed scroll view. What's identifier? What's unresolved? And so the reason why engineers are so OCD about spelling, about capitalization, is if you spell things wrong, it doesn't work, right? If I even were to capitalize the F here, it won't work, right? Again, it doesn't it thinks of this as a different thing than this. Remember, these are like the name tags, right? This is like a differently spelled name. Different capitalization equals differently spelled name. So the first thing that you have to do when you're playing along to Rosetta-style programming is you have to train your brain to, if I were to show you 2 pieces of code, it's like that game, Spot the Difference. Remember you ever play those magazines when you were a kid? Find the 12 differences? That's the role that you have to play. You're going to have a lot of sample code, and then you have your code, and you'll be like, what's the difference, right? And actually, you designers already have this superpower. You just have a different application. From across that screen, if there was a poster that was like that, you probably would have a heart attack or something, right? I mean, designers are very OCD about pixel alignment. Have you ever seen an engineer try to implement a mock before? It's like all over the place, and they're like, yeah, I think I nailed it. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's like 100% different from my, I'm like, what? It's like 3 pixels different, So it's the same thing. You just have to use that OCD power for another application. So there's more than just spelling, too. There's also where are we? Like, take a look at this. Look at this carefully, okay? There's an anatomy to this file, right? You see how there's this ragged thing? These lines are indented for a reason. In fact, don't do this. Don't randomly indent stuff, There's a nesting here. So you see this curly brace here? So this curly brace is closed by this curly brace down here. So the stuff in there, it's say, hey, this is all the stuff of my screen, of my view controller, right? And then my view controller has different tasks that it can do. It can do the thing that when I click on the like button to kind of turn the like button blue. That's a task. So those tasks exist within these functions, right? Kind of like the word implies. And so this function itself has curly cues, right? And so any code that you're writing needs to go within a function. So a function has this word function, then the name, which is the description of what it does, and then what you want it to do inside here. So here are your instructions for it, right? So you can't put code out here. So that's one thing that you do have to play along with. You have to kind of respect a little your playground, right? The only thing that can go outside of function are these name tags. These are called variables. So there's one final rule for Rosetta Stone programming, which is, anyone here raise your hand if you learned Spanish in high school. How about French? Keep your hands up. French, Spanish, Latin, German, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. You're just throwing me a bone. I don't know what, Friska, no foreign language? Spanish. Come on, I said Spanish first. All right. How much do you remember of Spanish, French, Japanese, Korean? A little bit? A little bit? Can you say anything? Maybe me llamo something or other? But maybe you can read it a little bit, right? Maybe you can read it, and if you see a sentence, you pick out 4 words, and there's probably some things that you can understand, right? So you have to put on your Spanish reading hat, right? What does a Spanish reading hat mean? Well, you have to kind of there's a lot of syntax here. There's a lot of ways of writing here that you don't know. I haven't explained to you, right? CG size, who knows? But, I mean, come on. We don't know what CG is, but size is size, right? How big do you want it to be? So your Spanish hat, right? Well, width, okay? Well, with colon should be with semicolon. Well, okay, monkey see, monkey do. Everywhere else, it's with colon, so don't put with semicolon. Just copy what you see elsewhere and pattern match, right? What does override mean? Anyone know what override means? What does override mean?
James, it means don't do what you usually do
Do what I tell you to do. That's what override means. All right, let me tell you another definition of override. That's a valid definition. Let me tell you another definition of override. Who cares? There's so many things. It just doesn't matter. Some functions have override. Some don't. If they are ones that you wrote, they don't have it. If they're ones that are already there, they have it. So if it's not hurting you, just leave it there and ignore it. So that's true for UIKit. It's true for colon. Who cares, right? It just doesn't matter. So you're going to be experts at copy, paste, and pattern matching. Now that doesn't mean it's easy. Don't turn your nose up at copy pasting. Copy pasting is actually really hard because every situation is similar but a little bit different. In fact, after the homeworks after the next 4 weeks, they're going to become you're going to find that over the next 2 months, 4 months of iOS development, that's going to become your Bible, your set of homeworks, because everything that you'll ever want to do, you will have done before. But you're going to need to translate it. Well, it's not feed scroll view in this case. Now it's actually like profile scroll view. And now it's not this, it's that. So you're going to have to pattern match, and then you're going to have to fix bugs. My gosh, you're going to have to fix bugs. So what we're really going to teach you is we're going to teach you how to copy and paste, and we're going to teach you how to fix the bugs that happen when situations are slightly different, right? Or you have a typo. Or there is going to be logic, like infinite loading. It is very possible to do, but there's some logic to it. There's when you get to the bottom of the screen, detect that you're at the bottom, add a new, increase the length of your scroll view, put a loading indicator there. Then eventually, when it's after a certain delay, move that loading indicator there to simulate the rest of the feed loading in, which, by the way, is really similar to how real infinite loading is implemented. So anyway, that's it. I know I'm over time, so let me just kind of quickly blow through my conclusion slides, and I'll leave you with a reminder of the tips. So we learned about how to replace click-through navigation here. We learned about the various types of navigation. So one-screen view controller. So that's the one vocabulary word. I'll try to use layman's terms as much as possible, but view controller is a screen. You have n number of view controllers for as many screens as you have in your app, and their names are hopefully something that makes sense to you. So this is Instagram, this is where I go home. This is my profile page. This is my notifications view controller. This is my compose view controller where I make a new tweet. And then a view controller has 2 aspects. It has the design, the visual aspect, and then it has some logic with it where I tell it what I want it to do, how I want it to behave. And then there's 3 types of navigation. There's modal navigation, which is this thing. Won't play them. There's push navigation. No, I guess it will play them. Push navigation, and then finally there's tab navigation. So the homework due Monday. All right, let me remind you of the quick tips. 1, if you want this goal, I'm trying to pitch you as hard as I can. This goal is impactful to you, and I think you understand it. So I want you to fight your human nature. When are you going to start your homework? Tonight or tomorrow, right? Maybe tonight's late. Tomorrow, for sure. If you're not starting by tomorrow, I don't know what to tell you. And then what are you going to do when you get stuck? You're going to stop. You're going to reach out for help. You're going to watch TV, or you're going to do a Treehouse Swift tutorial, or you're going to kind of undo the thing that was broken and work on a completely different feature. So you have to be in constant motion for 10 hours a week. There is no individual that I worked with who's in constant motion for 10 hours a week that did not go to the moon when it comes to iOS development. I think that's it. So I will see you on Thursday. Oh, does anyone prefer? I want to take a vote on Slack versus Facebook groups. So we're already in Facebook right now. There's pros and cons, Slack and Facebook. Slack kind of gets to be a mess, but then you kind of, I don't know, it's chat better, and Slack is cool. Does anyone, so we're going to vote on how we want to communicate as a class, via Slack or via Facebook. Who wants to communicate via Slack? Who wants to communicate via Facebook? Okay, that's like a tie. Let's just stick with Facebook. It's already set up. Okay, cool. I'll see you all on Thursday.